For years, the tragedy around Heather O'Rourke lingered and hushed conversations, as if Hollywood feared what deeper truths might emerge. Now, someone who grew up inside the business, Ron Howard, has stepped forward after decades of silence. His remarks, quiet yet cutting, reopened troubling questions about how a 12-year-old could rise so fast, glow so intensely, and vanish before anyone grasped the full story. And what he hints about Heather's final months has led many to wonder whether her death was inevitable or simply overlooked. Long before she became the unforgettable Caroline Freeling with a voice that chilled a generation, Heather O'Rourke was just a young girl in San Diego, born on December 27, 1975, to Kathleen and Michael O'Rourke. She spent her early years in a humble home where money was scarce, affection was constant, and Hollywood felt impossibly far away. When her parents divorced in 1981, Kathleen moved Heather and her older sister Tammy to a trailer park in Anaheim. Life lacked glamour, but their bond was strong, and nothing suggested Heather's path would lead to studio lights or movie sets. Everything shifted in 1980 when 5-year-old Heather visited the MGM lot while Tammy filmed Pennies from Heaven. Steven Spielberg, finishing his meal in the commissary, noticed the quiet blonde child sitting beside her mother. Moments later, he approached them, convinced he had found the angelic face he needed for Poltergeist. Heather froze during her first audition, unaccustomed to acting or the intensity of casting rooms. But once Spielberg asked her to scream, just scream, her voice hit the walls with such startling force that he hired her instantly. She surpassed Drew Barrymore, who was sent to E.T. instead. When Poltergeist premiered in June 1982, Heather became an overnight sensation. Opportunities flooded in: commercials, guest roles, long-term offers. She appeared as Heather Pfister on Happy Days, acted beside Linda Pearl and Henry Winkler, and became one of the most recognizable child stars of the era. Off-screen, she did her best to stay grounded, attending Big Bear Elementary, where she even served as president of her 5th grade class. Still, even then, the weight of fame was quietly reshaping her young world. Long hours, constant travel, and a family slowly relying on the income of a child actor all pressed against her. Her ascent was rapid, but no one imagined the same industry celebrating her was also steering her toward an ending no child deserves, the burden hidden behind her bright smile. As Heather's celebrity grew, the invisible pressures surrounding her intensified. To millions, she was the luminous girl who delivered the iconic line, "They're here." Behind closed doors, though, the workload placed on her small frame was far heavier than anyone outside the industry realized. Hollywood in the 80s lacked real protections for children. Rules were loose, schedules relentless, and studios often favored speed over safety. Heather, sweet, compliant, and eager to please, fit too neatly into a system that valued quiet endurance over well-being. By the time she filmed Poltergeist 2 in 1985, she was handling adult-level demands masked as child-friendly workdays. The emotional scenes, the rehearsals, the endless waiting, the pressure to stay cheerful and polished, all of it wore her down. Her mother Kathleen did her best, escorting her to sets, ensuring tutors were available, and trying to keep life normal, but a difficult reality lingered. The household depended on Heather's paychecks. Her roles kept them afloat after years of barely making ends meet in a trailer park. If Heather slowed down, the family felt the strain. By 1986, quiet signals suggested something was off. Her energy faded. She mentioned stomach pain and fatigue, yet rarely resisted what studios asked of her. She adored acting, adored her fans, adored the excitement to bringing characters to life. But inside, she was growing weary. When she contracted giardiasis from contaminated well water at Big Bear Lake, the lingering symptoms were brushed aside. And when her face swelled from cortisone given under the mistaken belief she had Crohn's disease, she accepted it without protest. She was told this was part of the job, something she needed to push through.
On set, some noticed how pale she grew between takes or how often she asked for water, but she never complained loud enough to halt filming. A child desperate not to disappoint, Heather pressed on. Even as her body sent distress signals, no one recognized the full picture. These were the first warnings. But Hollywood didn't slow. Scripts kept coming and Heather kept appearing, smiling for cameras that couldn't see the pain behind her bright eyes. By late 1987, the symptoms were impossible to ignore. She had just finished filming Poltergeist 3 in June, yet something about her appearance seemed undeniably different. Her cheeks looked unusually swollen. Her strength seemed to slip away faster than before, and by the time she held her stomach, it was clear she was masking something deeper. Although doctors claimed she was battling Crohn's disease, that diagnosis would soon unravel completely. Even so, they placed her on cortisone, far too strong for a child, and sent her home insisting she only needed time to recover. But time was something Hollywood rarely offered its youngest stars, leaving little room for healing. Kathleen, her mother, watched with rising dread as each symptom grew worse. On days when Heather would normally chatter endlessly, she instead grew quiet, pulling away from everything and everyone. Missing school frustrated her, especially because being class president made her feel obligated to show up. Still, she kept pushing herself, refusing to disappoint anyone around her. To fans, she stayed the bright, cheerful actress they adored. Inside the Ur household, however, an unspoken terror was taking shape. When January 31st, 1988, Super Bowl Sunday, arrived, everything finally fell apart. Heather spent the day vomiting every few hours, her face gray and her body drained. Kathleen offered her sips of Gatorade, hoping desperately to steady her. By the next morning, Heather claimed she was well enough for school, but the moment breakfast was served, she choked on her toast and whispered that she couldn't swallow. Soon after, her fingers and toes faded to a frightening blue. Then her breathing shifted. Within moments, Kathleen understood this was no simple flu and certainly not Crohn's. As she hurried Heather toward the car, the little girl collapsed in her arms. Paramedics brought her back once, but her condition hovered on the edge of disaster. She was rushed to El Cajon Community Hospital, then airlifted to the Children's Hospital of San Diego, where surgeons finally uncovered the real cause. What they found was a congenital intestinal blockage that had silently existed since birth. Infection had torn through her body, leading to overwhelming septic shock. Doctors fought to save her during emergency surgery, but her small frame could no longer withstand the trauma. At 2:43 p.m. on February 1st, 1988, just weeks after turning 12, Heather O'Rourke was gone. Hollywood lost a rising performer, a family lost their heart, and the world lost a child whose story ended far too soon. What remained were unanswered questions about blame, grief, and a mother unwilling to disappear quietly. News of Heather O'Rourke's death ripped through Hollywood with sudden, shocking force. She was young, adored, and had never appeared to harbor a condition so severe. Many people struggled to accept the coroner's findings. How could a child surrounded by top-tier medical care die from a congenital blockage no one ever detected? And why had she been labeled with Crohn's disease, a condition she never actually had? Kathleen Ur, devastated beyond words, refused to allow her daughter's story to fade unresolved. In May 1988, only 3 months after the tragedy, she filed a wrongful death lawsuit against Kaiser Foundation Hospital of San Diego and the Southern California Permanente Medical Group. Her claim was direct and devastating. Kaiser had failed her daughter.
She insisted that X-rays taken a year earlier should have revealed the intestinal narrowing present since Heather's birth. Had those images been properly interpreted, Kathleen argued, my daughter would be alive today. The case immediately sparked controversy. Kaiser stood by its doctors, saying their diagnosis and treatment were appropriate and that Heather's condition was unusually hidden. But several experts challenged that defense. Dr. Daniel Hollander, head of gastroenterology at UC Irvine, publicly stated that Heather's case was highly unusual, noting that congenital stenosis typically produces lifelong symptoms. His remarks only amplified suspicions that key warning signs had been missed. Meanwhile, the team behind Poltergeist 3 entered a moral crisis. Heather's death struck just 4 months before the film's planned June 1988 release. Executives debated whether they could promote it without appearing to take advantage of her passing, leading co-stars Tom Skerritt and Nancy Allen to avoid interviews entirely. When the movie finally debuted, it carried a dedication to Heather, though the gesture couldn't ease the unease surrounding it. Inside the O'Rourke home, grief continued to tear at every corner of their lives. Heather wasn't just a working actress, she was the family's light, their pride, and the steady center they leaned on. Losing her didn't just break their hearts, it shattered the dreams they believed they were building together. While Hollywood retreated into silence, one person, himself shaped by childhood stardom, chose not to stay quiet. Ron Howard eventually spoke out, and his words landed heavily. For years, many within the industry avoided commenting on the circumstances of Heather O'Rourke's death. Silence felt like the safer option. Hollywood had long preferred avoidance over confronting difficult truths. But Ron Howard, who spent his own childhood under the glare of cameras before becoming a director, finally chose to say something. His statements, calm yet unmistakably pointed, reopened questions Hollywood had hoped would remain buried. Howard had worked with Heather during her recurring role as Heather Pfister on Happy Days, remembering her as bright, eager, and exceptionally well-mannered, traits the industry often took advantage of. And when asked decades later about her death, he chose not to hide behind generic condolences. Rather than focusing on himself, he shifted the conversation to the industry and how it had shaped the lives of children like Heather. Softly, he admitted, she was overworked. Expectations piled onto someone her age were simply too much to carry. I find myself thinking about her often. Those 7 words, she was overworked, struck harder than any elaborate claim because Howard didn't identify anyone directly. He made no effort to highlight a particular producer, director, or studio figure, yet it wasn't necessary. From someone as measured and respected as Ron Howard, even the slightest suggestion felt like an accusation. To Howard, nothing about this was conjecture. He had walked the path of a child actor himself. He had endured demanding hours, constant scripts, perfection-seeking producers, and a machine that ran faster than any child reasonably could. And he recognized how effortlessly a young performer could be pushed too far simply because adults mistook a smile for genuine well-being. Howard's remarks brought an unsettling question back into the open. Had Hollywood ignored the warnings? During the filming of Poltergeist 3, Heather's declining health was impossible to miss. Her face had swollen from cortisone, her stamina was fading, her symptoms were worsening in ways anyone observant would have noticed. Still, she continued to work. Production moved forward. Schedules outweighed the suffering of a child. While Howard never accused any individual of causing Heather's death, he did underline something undeniable. Hollywood, powered by money and momentum, had not safeguarded her. His remarks urged many to reconsider whether her loss stemmed solely from illness or from a system that treated a 12-year-old as if she were replaceable. It was a legacy shadowed by persistent doubts. Ron Howard's words didn't just reopen old grief. They pushed fans and insiders to face a truth quietly suspected for years. Heather O'Rourke wasn't merely undone by a medical condition. She was caught inside a system that demanded more from her than any child should ever be asked to give. Even as her strength faded, she kept showing up. She kept giving performances. She kept carrying the weight of a major franchise because no one around her expected her to say, "I can't." After she passed, Hollywood attempted to move forward, but the audience didn't. Fans mourned her as if she were part of their own families. Vigils appeared, letters poured in. Newspapers revisited her story in an effort to understand how a seemingly healthy young girl could disappear so suddenly. And when Poltergeist 3 debuted 4 months later with a dedication to her, viewers watched with new eyes. Every scene featuring Heather felt heavier. Every smile seemed laced with sorrow. In the years that followed, theories spread. Some blamed a rumored curse. Others suspected medical mistakes. Some insisted the studio should have intervened sooner. Yet beneath all the theories sat one truth that couldn't be ignored. Heather's passing could have been avoided. A congenital intestinal stenosis doesn't develop out of nowhere. Signs had been there. Doctors misinterpreted them, and a child paid with her life. Kathleen O'Rourke sought accountability through legal action, later reaching a settlement. Tammy O'Rourke, Heather's sister, stayed away from public attention until decades later, when her own daughter confirmed the medical facts of Heather's death. And in 2024, the documentary Heather O'Rourke, She Was Here, renewed widespread interest in her story, gathering relatives and co-stars Craig T. Nelson and Jo Beth Williams to remember the little girl who left too early. Today, Heather's story stands as one of Hollywood's starkest reminders of how vulnerable young performers are. She was gifted, hardworking, and cherished by millions, but admiration and fame weren't enough to shield her when her body signaled distress. What are your thoughts? Was Heather pushed too far, or was her destiny unchangeable? Tell us in the comments. And for more deep explorations into Hollywood's hidden histories, remember to like this video, subscribe, and hit the bell so you never miss an update.